one pre-Carcass question. How good was Electro Hippies?
Well, that's Jeff's band.
I know.
Yeah.
Maybe you can answer it.
I saw his last ever gig with Electro Hippies. Yeah, which I guess was, that must have been 1986 maybe. I enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't my favorite band from that era, you know, but they were quite ahead of their time. They were playing super fast and they didn't really get the credit for it.
Yeah.
Then or later. Yeah, I mean, that's how I got to know Jeff, really. Yeah.
And where did it start from there for you then, with Jeff?
Sorry?
Where did it start from there?
If I remember correctly, around that time I'd been playing with some older guys who they had a band called Disattack, which was a Discharge influence group, and they wanted to go a little bit more metal in their direction, so they asked me to join, and that was starting to kind of fizzle out, and I think Jeff came in to replace the bass player we'd had, even though Jeff was known as a singer really, but he played a bit of bass. So he came in, and then suddenly I had somebody in the band who liked the same music as me, you know, because I was very into bands like Death and Repulsion and Master at that time.
Yeah.
So we talked about it and we realized we weren't going to get what we wanted musically in that band, and gradually we took it back to being Carcass, which was, you know, a band that I'd had at school in '85. They didn't really do anything, just a couple of rehearsals and, you know, a few tapes. But yeah, that's the kind of origins of the Carcass that people know now. Yeah.
If you listen back to those, do you still have those old maybe pre-first album demos or?
Yes, I've definitely got. I think stored away somewhere. I have 2 rehearsal tapes from the 1985 lineup, which was just a school band, just kids.
Yeah.
And then I probably have some bits and pieces from the early '87 stuff with Carcass. And there's definitely one kind of studio demo we did, which was known as Flesh-Ripping Sonic Torment. And that was recorded in a teeny studio, almost like a squat really, but it was the first attempt at a real recording we'd done. I can't remember what month that was, but it was sometime in '87, before the first album.
But did it change a lot of music on the first album, or?
No, not really. I mean, on the demo we had a vocalist, this guy we knew from somewhere in Merseyside called Sanjeev, who was older than we were, like by several years. And then he kind of disappeared. And when we had the offer from Earache to make an album, we did it as a trio, and we just did vocals for the first time in the studio. You know, we were just young. It was just a good thing to do. We didn't have much planning behind it, but it was fun, and I guess we just agreed. You know, it wasn't the greatest sounding recording, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn. You know, you just got to get out there and make a few mistakes.
Yeah, but you did. Let's say until '93, you released 4 albums in 4 years.
Yeah, well, I would say the music changed somewhat between every record we did. Because there was enough time for us to kind of assess what we were doing and our place in the scene or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we just tried to keep moving forward. Yeah.
If you look back on those first years, what album do you like?
Oh, I like all of them really, in different ways. I mean, the first album I really didn't like at the time because I was very disappointed. I just thought we'd let ourselves down, and sonically it was just all over the place. But now I'm fond of it because it's such a bizarre recording, and it sort of represents where we were at, you know, because we weren't great musicians, we were very inexperienced. It's kind of a weird artifact of that era for us. I like them all, but my favorite one from the old days would be Heartwork, just because that's the first time I remember coming home with a cassette from the studio and playing it on my own stereo and really enjoying what I was hearing. You know, it was kind of a good time for us because we were firing on all cylinders musically, and we had the production we wanted for the first time too. I think Colin was at the peak of his game, you know, as a producer, and we had a great engineer, Keith Andrews. So everything kind of came together on that record for me, but I guess there's plenty of people who feel differently.
And well, you named how you look back on first album. Second album, a quick thought on it?
That was when we started to get better, definitely, because that's the first record with Colin, and he spent a lot of time working on Ken's drumming, because Ken had only really started drumming in 1987, the same year we did the first album.
Yeah.
So he was just thrown in at the deep end. But Symphonies is where he really started to get his act together. And yeah, I mean, really fond memories of that one. You know, we were recording at this studio called the Slaughterhouse in North Yorkshire. And it was a big place, and I mean, it felt like luxury to us. We had a load of fun, and we were quite pleased with the outcome, I suppose. Yeah.
And the third album?
Third one, yeah, that's when we got really ambitious musically. We were trying to push it very hard because we realised there's loads of bands, or at least enough to make us nervous. Look, a significant number of bands that were doing something similar to what we'd done on the first two records. And
can you name me a few that you were?
I'd rather not, because they'd probably disagree, and they'd say, "Oh no, we weren't influenced by Carcass," but they had kind of a similar lyric content, and it was very grindy and stuff. So yeah, I think we just wanted to push it harder in a more difficult direction to prove to ourselves as much as anybody that we could do it. And also we were listening to other things at that time. By that point we were firmly kind of in the direction of listening to a lot of old heavy metal and hard rock. And anything contemporary we listened to, I guess, would have been the slightly trickier stuff.
Yeah.
So that's us pushing our boundaries. I mean, that's the limit of what we could play at that time, really, you know.
So there was, well, we already discussed Heartwork, Swansong, well, the last album of that era. Did you know it was a Swansong?
Yeah, well, it wasn't called that when we did the record. Okay. You know.
What was it called?
We didn't have a name. I mean, if I remember correctly, we did about 15 songs, and we hadn't decided which songs would be on the record. And we finished recording more or less, but we hadn't agreed on a track list or anything. And then after that, it gets messy. All I remember is I definitely said I was quitting at some point, and then the band folded around that time.
Why did you want to quit?
I was fairly certain there was no future for us, really. When we were rehearsing the material, you could tell it was over, I thought. Yeah, for sure. I really wanted it to work, but it just wasn't working anymore. And I'm sure Jeff would say the same.
How come? Because of the chemistry, or?
Yeah, the chemistry in the band, we were just sick of each other as people. And like musically maybe a little too. And I think I have to take quite a lot of the blame, because I wanted to push the musical direction into a more traditional kind of rocky kind of way. And it's cool to test the limits, but you know, maybe I took it too far on that. You know, and I stripped it down to 2 guitars as well, 1 in each channel. Because in my mind, that was more honest. You know, I was listening to stuff like Johnny Winter and AC/DC, and applying those principles to our band, which maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, really. But having said that, I do like some of the stuff on the record.
Well, the others, they went on to form Blackstar.
Yep.
What were your thoughts on that? That they formed Blackstar and that.
Well, I knew they were going to do something, because I think when I said I was leaving, there was a bit of debate, like whether they would continue as Carcass or not, and then that became Blackstar. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even hear that record until long after the fact.
Why? Because it was too hard, or?
No, not really. It was more like I just really wanted to just close that chapter. I mean, I was so bitter when Carcass broke up. I'm sure the other guys were a little as well, but maybe not to the same degree as me. I just didn't want to hear anything about it or anything from that scene. I really just wanted to escape it, you know.
Why?
Loads of reasons, you know. I was disappointed with how the band ended. I thought, you know, we should have at least had one more good album in us, but we didn't. And also, I hated the way metal was going. You know, that climate at the time, I just couldn't relate to it. You're hearing all kinds of things like industrial influences coming in, like hip hop. I mean, that music's gone on to be very popular, so that's just a personal taste thing, but I didn't really like it, you know, in the context of metal music.